This year's honey harvest was different from any other. It's late in the season due to a summer of drought. Drought conditions can reduce the number of flowering plants, leading to a significant decrease in nectar sources for bees. This limits the bees' ability to produce honey, often resulting in smaller honey harvests. I considered not harvesting at all, but I needed to open the hives to see how much honey stores they had to make sure they could get through the winter. The scarcity of food puts stress on bee colonies, which can weaken the bees' immune systems and make them more susceptible to diseases and pests. I lost one hive a few weeks ago, and it put me on high alert. I had noticed odd behavior in this hive one day and realized the queen was dead at the entrance. Without a queen, the hive cannot produce new workers, leading to a decline in population. The colony becomes disorganized, often displaying erratic behavior, and over time, the hive weakens and becomes vulnerable to pests and disease. The colony was small, so there must have been a gap in egg laying, probably because they produced this queen recently. I'm not sure what had happened. She looked young, small, so perhaps she was injured on a mating flight. The old queen may have either had problems or had just stopped laying. To help the queenless hive recover, I transferred a frame from one of my strong hives containing young eggs and brood. Worker bees can raise a new queen by selecting a young egg and feeding it a special diet of royal jelly, and then nurturing it to develop into the queen. This remarkable ability allows the colony to regenerate and restore its structure. But next thing I knew, small hive beetles had taken over. They thrive in conditions when the bee population is too low to defend the hive properly. They lay their eggs in the hive, and the larvae can destroy the honeycomb and ferment the honey, rendering it unusable. Pests are a constant challenge in beekeeping, and weakened hives are particularly susceptible. While chemical treatments are available, they come with risks such as contaminating the honey or disrupting the hive's natural balance. This is why some beekeepers, myself included, choose treatment-free beekeeping. The idea is to avoid using treatments, instead allowing natural selection to strengthen the bees over time. This method encourages colonies to develop their own defenses against pests and disease. Treatment-free beekeeping isn't without its challenges or controversy. I have never treated pests in the 12 years I've been keeping bees. If we allow only the strongest colonies to survive and reproduce, it promotes stronger, more resilient bees over time. It aligns with sustainable and organic practices that I value. Unfortunately, treatment-free hives can be at a higher risk of loss. As beekeepers, it's our responsibility to understand the forces affecting our hives, from drought to pests, and adapt accordingly. Whether through treatment-free practices or supporting our bees during times of scarcity, every decision we make shapes the future of our colonies. What I'm doing is taking off that honey super. It's not quite full. I can feel the weight. This one I suspect is completely full, so I'm going to switch them, and then I'm going to go through them frame by frame and take the frames that are fully capped. Okay, what I'm going to do before I begin is to feel the weight of these brood boxes rather than opening them all up, which I don't have time for today. And it looks like most of their frames are full of honey on top, so I'm just going to tilt it. They need at least 50 to 60 pounds of honey to get them through the winter. And that felt pretty solid, but what I usually do is leave one honey super on and leave them several frames with honey in them, just to make sure. I like to make sure that they keep their own honey rather than having to feed them. So I'm going to place this back on here. In the same orientation that it began. Just give them a little puff of smoke. That just keeps them calm. And start from the beginning. What I'm doing here is breaking the propolis seal. Because I leave these honey supers on for quite a while, they build up propolis. And so I'm looking for frames of full capped honey. You can see this one here is full of nectar, uncapped nectar. This is the only section right here that has wax cappings. They won't cap it until it's at least 17 to 18% moisture content, and that preserves it. And so you can see there's nectar on this side too. So this frame will stay in the honey super over the winter. We don't want to squish any bees, so I'm just gently putting it there. And I will slide it this way. And it looks like the next frame is the same way. Yeah. Looks like they had used this. This is a good one to point out. So at one point, they've used this frame as drone comb. You can see these larger cells, much bigger than these here, which is one of the consequences of leaving them on during the winter, but it still works best for me. That way I know they have plenty of stores. Yes, there's only a few cells that are uncapped right here, so I'm going to go ahead and take this one. And so what I do is a quick cursory glance, try and make sure that the queen is not on here. I don't want to injure her. And so I'm just going to gently, first, if there's a lot of bees, I usually shake them, and then I brush off. So then I put it in an empty box and make sure it stays covered so that I don't get a lot of bees going in and out. Notice that I'm standing to the side of the hive so that I don't block them. That tends to make them just a little bit more testy. One test you can do is give it a little bit of a shake, and if the nectar doesn't fall out, then chances are it's okay, as long as the majority are fully capped. So again, that just separates the propolis. It's nice and warm out here today, and so it's not super sticky. The bees aren't aggressive. Again, a lot of uncapped honey. So So this one I'm going to stay for sure, but this one I may come back to. And I think the next two are probably not full either, so let's take a look. Yeah, they're simply just, look at that, so pretty. That is just nectar. Which is actually a really good sign, because that means they've been bringing back some nectar recently. And I can see the next frame, there's lots of bees in there too, so I'm not even going to pull that one out. So what I'm going to do is start working on this box, put over any uncapped frames into the super. So if you can see, there's lots of bees in this area right here. This is probably what they were working on, because this was on top. And so I'm just going to go frame by frame, see what we have. Could be the queen in this area because there are so many bees moving around. But anyway, we'll just take it frame by frame and see how it goes. This one was definitely used as brood comb. Rather recently, it looks like, and there's a small hive beetle. So this hive I'm just going to leave alone for the rest of the year. I'm going to go ahead and put on their moisture boards. So this is absorbent material. This divot here is to allow an extra exit, and for airflow. And then I will place the moisture board there. And I like to use chopsticks, they're perfect, I always save them. That gives a little bit of an air gap, and that moisture condensation will have a little bit of way to get out, escape. I just go slow, and that way if I feel the resistance of a bee, I can back off. I don't squish any. All right, so now there's a little air gap here, and that allows the bee still to go in and out of that entrance, which I can close off in the case of a robbing situation. But definitely try to keep that free and clear. All right, this hive's done. And always keep a rock, a lot of people use bricks, on top, and that weighs it down in case of windstorms or something like that. It protects them, keeps the lid on. I have had it blow off before in a bad storm. And these we call solar shades. I like to keep them in full sun. There's less of a pest problem from what I understand. But these give them just a little bit of respite in the middle of the day in the heat. And it also keeps excess moisture, excess rain from getting in their entrance. Let's move on to the yellow. So I left enough on each hive. They have, just based on weight, they have 50 to 60 pounds in their brood boxes, and then half to a full honey super, which a lot of people don't leave honey supers on over the winter. All right, so I just wrapped up the fall honey harvest for this year. There's 5 boxes. Each of them have 9 frames instead of the 10, just because it makes them a little bit lighter, easier to take into the house and get processed. It's quite heavy and it's kind of rough as I get older. Real close to about 150 pounds, more than enough for me to process. And so I do have a bulk buyer, thank goodness. That eases up on the bottling strain, and enough to share with friends and family. Makes great Christmas gifts. As you might be able to tell, I've got some robbers in the vicinity, and so I need to vacate the premises so that I can get rid of the temptation and let these hives get back into their natural groove. Right now I've got their upper entrances all closed off just to give them a little extra leg up. And I'll begin bottling probably tomorrow, and we'll see how much we actually get. And get out of this apiary and let the bees get back to business. Once the frames of honeycomb are removed from the hive, it's time to move on to extraction. The process begins with removing a frame from the honey super using my hive tool to break the propolis seal. Propolis is a very sticky resin that bees collect from tree buds and other plant materials. They use it to seal gaps and create a sterile environment within the hive. It essentially glues everything together. This incredible substance plays a key role in hive hygiene. This process is very meditative, even cathartic, but it is time-consuming. You can see this frame displays beautifully drawn-out honeycomb with a clean, even structure. The comb is slightly thicker than the frame, and it makes uncapping straightforward as the uncapping knife glides along the wax. Frames like these keep the process smooth and efficient. It just requires a few extra touches from the uncapping tool for any remaining bits. Here's another frame. This one is a bit thinner. That means I'll need to rely on the uncapping tool a little more to remove the wax fully. Frames like these require extra care and extra time to get it just right. After the frames are uncapped, I place them into the extractor, a large cylindrical drum equipped with slots for each frame. The extractor spins the frames at high speed, either by hand crank or a motor. I made the switch to an electric extractor a couple of years ago, and it has made a world of difference, speeding up the process and saving a lot of time and effort. As the extractor spins, centrifugal force pushes the honey from the comb cells into the inner walls of the drum. To ensure the honey is removed, sometimes the frames need to be flipped or rotated depending on the extractor's design. The honey then slides down the walls and collects at the bottom of the drum, ready to be drained through a spigot we call a honey gate. From there, I use a food-grade 5-gallon bucket fitted with a fine 400-micron filter to remove any wax particles. This mesh catches larger debris but still allows smaller elements like pollen grains to pass through, ensuring a clean, smooth product. Many people enjoy honey for the purposes of consuming pollen, as it's thought to help reduce allergies, though it's important to choose local honey to your particular area. After extraction, these frames will go back into the hives where the bees will clean up any remaining honey. The extractor doesn't remove every bit of honey. There's a light film that coats all of the comb. These frames will go back to the hives where the bees will clean up any remaining honey. I let the extracted honey settle for several hours overnight before bottling, which allows the bubbles to rise to the top for a clear final product. Now we move on to bottling. Bottling can be a very satisfying process. This year I decided to use only glass containers. Glass is endlessly recyclable, and it's especially convenient if honey crystallizes, as the bottle can be gently heated to reliquefy. Crystallization is a completely natural process where glucose in honey forms crystals over time. It can vary from batch to batch, as the ratio of glucose to fructose can change. The glucose in honey is what forms crystals over time. It's a clear sign that the honey is unprocessed and still full of beneficial enzymes and pollen. The texture changes, but the pure, sweet flavor remains. Honey lasts forever as long as it's not contaminated by water. In fact, crystallized honey can be transformed into a whipped honey, a smooth and spreadable treat. I decided to try making whipped honey this year. I first placed the crystallized honey into a mixing bowl. I used a hand mixer with a whisk attachment and began whipping the honey on low speed, gradually increasing to medium speed. I whipped the honey for about 15 to 20 minutes until it turned light in color and had a creamy, smooth texture. The honey has a more spreadable consistency, almost like butter. Once it's reached the whipped consistency, I transferred it into an airtight jar and I'll store it in a cool place. The whipped honey holds its creamy texture and is less likely to crystallize further. Now, if you'd like to make this and you have liquid honey, you do need a small amount of already crystallized honey to use as a seed. Whipped honey is perfect on toast, in desserts, or drizzled over fruit. After extracting all the honey supers, I return them to the hives for the bees to clean up. They meticulously gather every speck. This makes it very convenient for me so I can store the clean empty supers covered outside. By allowing them to access the honey from inside the hive, it minimizes the chance of robbing, but I always keep an eye out for it, ready to close the upper entrances or reduce the main entrance. It did happen on this particular day, but it didn't last for long as the remaining hives are pretty strong and they defended the entrance. Honeybee robbing occurs when bees from one colony attempt to steal honey from neighboring hive, often during times of scarcity, like late summer or early fall when nectar sources are limited. This can be from my own apiary or wild hives in the trees surrounding me. Robbing behavior can become very aggressive, with bees fighting at the entrance of the hive, leading to injuries or even death of worker bees. They can even destroy the whole hive. During robbing, invading bees try to bypass the guard bees at the entrance, creating chaos within the hive and often causes stress and disorganization. It's under control. Thank goodness. They're up here at the top because that's the fresh box on top, and so the scent of honey is stronger there. But they can't get in the upper entrance. I've got it closed off. But they'll keep trying for quite some time. Robbing not only depletes the honey stores the host colony needs for winter, but they also can spread disease and pests between hives. Beekeepers often take precautions such as reducing entrance sizes or covering the hives with robbing screens to help the colony defend itself and maintain its resources during these challenging times. This season was tough, and losing a colony to small hive beetles after it became queenless was a sad day. But even in a year like this, there's so much to be grateful for. Honeybees are resilient creatures, and they've taught me a lot about adaptability, patience, and balance. But this harvest isn't the end of the story. After the honey is jarred, there's still plenty to do. I'll be putting the wax cappings out for the bees to clean, and then I'll be rendering that beeswax for different projects. I'm hoping to make some more lip balm and salve, and even try my hand at some soap. In the meantime, I'll link last year's videos just in case you want to take a look. There's always something new to create and share from the hive. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you have any questions or comments, please leave them down below. I'd love to hear from you, and we'll see you in the next video.